I think setting boundaries, especially very early on, obviously I think that's key. That this is how you can talk to me. This is how you cannot talk to me. Just because you're upset doesn't give you a right to curse at somebody, yell at them, or be verbally abusive. I think those are absolutely intolerable. And I'm very fortunate enough to be with somebody that boundary has never been crossed. We both have very strict, parameters of how we speak to each other and how we do not speak to each other. And I urge everybody to, whether it's a friendship, whether it is a relationship, have those boundaries. Even a family member, right? Very important. Just because they're a family member doesn't mean they have the right to talk to you however they want to. Even if it's a mother or father, have those boundaries. What's up, guys?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of
The Coffee Breakup.
Yes, where we're going in depth of the keys. So we, over the last 3 years of us doing this podcast, 3 years and change, actually, we've learned a lot. We've gotten a lot of feedback and a lot of questions. So basically, we wanted to compile everything over the last 3 years to basically give you, there's some key points of what to do to be a better individual overall. Learn how to maximize your true potential in order to eventually find, the right people around you, good friends, good environment around you, especially with finding the right person that's meant for you.
Absolutely. For the people that have just now tuning in, we have a book, Starting From Within, of course, and the keys are essentially everything that kind of encapsulates that course.
Exactly. So we worked really hard over the course of I would say the winter, last summer as well. I don't even remember when we started doing this.
It's been a while, actually.
But it's something that we wanted to put together. Again, it's what we've learned over the last 3 years that we really want to just create that what helped us basically put it onto paper and hopefully to help you guys. What started off as a book, eventually we realized, we want to kind of expand on it, be more detailed, to really explain everything that why we put everything in the book. So we have the expanded course that goes into detail with videos. It's a lot more interactive.
Yeah.
We have the book if you do want to read and really get the whole gist of what it is that we put together. But obviously, if you don't like reading or if you at least want a taste of what it is, we created the keys, which is basically like some sort of bylaws and key points for you to just kind of practice every day to, again, little reminders of what it is that you need to do to be the best individual that you can be.
Absolutely. So now we're in part 2. It's put in the effort. The first 2-3 chapters where part 1, where it's about you and the individual and everything that they can do in order to control themselves and the person that they are. So now we're at part 2, put in the effort, where it's you're expanding a little bit into relationships, platonic, and so forth,
and eventually intimate. But just like Marvin said, the beginning was about how to restructure basically how you feel, the foundation, building more security within yourself, being happy with yourself. So now it's it's one thing to be aware, but then we got to take action. That's what part 2 is about.
So now we're communication versus interpretation.
Right. So there's a big difference.
You wrote this chapter, and I think that was probably one of the first ones that you've written.
That was
so important to you, right?
It was probably the most important one because we talk about effective communication of how important it is in every relationship when it comes to platonic, intimate, or professional, even at work. I mean, imagine sometimes when you're reading an email and you're like, are they trying to tell me off here or something? And maybe it's not. They just don't know how to communicate effectively. So there's a lot of different things of how we talk, but then how the other party on the other side really interprets what it is that you're saying. So we created, obviously this chapter to kind of go into a little bit. So for you, sir, what do you think would be like the biggest differences between both?
Obviously, it's a lot of times it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You've told me this too. Like,
Excellent.
Let's say you communicate with your partner, and sometimes maybe it's an argument, or there's like a frustration that's brewing. A lot of times, and I've been guilty of that too, where I would say certain things and maybe it wasn't the most sensitive way of saying it, and maybe that message got lost somewhere because I didn't really know how to express myself. And so now that I'm 3 years into my relationship, pretty much, I've kind of figured out. I know time flies. I've figured out how to say certain things. Right? Be compassionate, be kind, be honest, and be respectful too with your partner. And we have written down, first thing is clearly express the feeling that you are feeling. Right. So I think being vulnerable, is a big part of that as well. Right. Saying, hey, this is how I feel. It made me feel this way. Instead of blaming them, like, you did this, say, well, you know what, I am feeling this way. And so I think that's a big part as well.
Yeah. So to your point of being vulnerable and being able to express yourself, it really allows your partner to understand where you're coming from. And I think that that's the biggest problem, because a lot of times, and I don't want to generalize, but I feel like most men have problem solving mindsets where we see a problem, we just want to solve it. We don't want to deal with it anymore. And again, because speaking very generally, I feel like women are more emotional when it comes to it, how they feel about the situation. So for us, sometimes, like even with my partner, like I'll respond to her and I'm just thinking of the solution, like, and I'm very direct, like I have a bunch of things in my mind. So if something happens, I respond, and maybe they're like, you know, like, that's like, why'd you say it like that? And in my mind, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you're telling me that here's a problem. The solution is this. And then it could turn into an argument sometimes. Fortunately for us, again, we've been dating. Well, I've known this girl forever, but you know, we've been dating seriously, you know, for a little bit right now. And it's important because I've been able to clearly express myself, and now like they know exactly who I am. They're more understanding of what it is that I'm trying to say and how I come across certain topics or whatever comments that I make. So they know my intention isn't to be offending them, or to come off as a dick. Obviously, I do have to be aware of how I'm doing it. So the next one is obviously speak respectfully and avoid blaming. So it's true, because there's a way of coming off on it, but you also, even though you know your partner and you know how to communicate with them, sometimes things can get misinterpreted. And I think if you always try to think out, well, I don't want to offend them, I don't want to hurt them. Like if I'm trying to communicate and say something, it's not with the intention of me trying to blame them or bother them. It's, I want to make them feel understood, and I want them to understand where I'm coming from. And I think that that's where, you know, speaking respectfully and avoid blaming allows you to really be on the same page of what's going on, instead of blaming the other partner. Because we always say it's not you versus your partner. The problem should be you and your partner versus that problem.
Correct.
And I think that that's where it creates the environment for you guys to work together.
For sure, absolutely. And then point 3 is listen and share the point of view. You know, like, be understanding. Let them express themselves, where they're coming from. Where are you coming from? Tell me how you feel so I can understand, and then I'll share my view. And then maybe they were like, well, you know what? I never even thought about it this way. I didn't even think of that perspective. And so, especially when you're with somebody, it could be, you can't read their mind. I can't read your mind. And so when you tell me how you feel and what made you think this way, now I can put myself in your position and I can understand. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, listening and sharing their point of view, just like you said it spot on, because it allows for both parties to say what they need to say. And as long as we stick to the first 2 points as we go down this,
of course,
if we're expressing our feelings, now it's not like we're pointing the finger and blaming anybody. We're now talking about how it makes us feel when certain situations happen. Because if you're in a relationship, it's not like you want to bother somebody else. It's not like you want to be a dick to them. I mean, what's the point of you in being with someone if you're going to mistreat them? Although it exists out there, and the whole point of why we're creating this is for you to feel stronger and more secure in yourself, to avoid falling into maybe relationships that aren't meant for you. But obviously, as you're able to communicate and effectively talk about how you feel, you're able to kind of empathize with the other person, and then you're actually able to find solutions together. So when you're able to share your point of view, you see how you're discussing of how you see the situation, and it might not be the way that you're seeing it, because that's where the misinterpretation comes in.
Correct.
So it allows us to be like, oh shit, like, even though I'm telling you, so I'm communicating something to you, you're not interpreting in the way that I want to. Now that you're explaining and expressing your point of view, now I'm able to understand more, so I know exactly how to solve the problem together.
Absolutely. The next one is set boundaries. I think that's super important.
That's probably one of the most important ones. That should have been the first one.
Yes, because I feel like just because you're with somebody doesn't mean it gives you the right to speak to them in any shape or form. I think setting boundaries, especially very early on, obviously I think that's key. That this is how you can talk to me, this is how you cannot talk to me. Just because you're upset doesn't give you a right to curse at somebody, yell at them, or be verbally abusive. I think those are absolutely intolerable. And I'm very fortunate enough to be with somebody that boundary has never been crossed. You know, we both have very strict, parameters of how we speak to each other and how we do not speak to each other. And I urge everybody to, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a relationship, have those boundaries. Even a family member, right? Very important. Just because they're a family member doesn't mean they have the right to talk to you however they want to. Even if it's a mother or father, have those boundaries.
Very good point.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that up until now, but it's so true, because you feel like, well, that's my family. I have to accept that. I have to accept how they speak to me. And it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah, on the
No, you
contrary,
don't.
I mean that's usually how a lot of trauma happens. I mean, just imagine what you're holding on to, maybe the baggage that you're holding on to, or maybe just how you were raised with whatever traumas it is that you had to deal with your family. And now as an adult, you still feel like they can just walk all over you or tell you certain things because they're your family. And at the end of the day, dude, you're a person, like you're a human being, and there's certain things that you can tolerate, what you can't tolerate. And I feel like we're more tolerable to the things that we were raised, so our upbringing will allow us to be more understanding of it. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean that it's okay. Right?
Absolutely.
So whatever you go through, just because it's how you were raised, doesn't mean that you should continue dealing with it if you don't like it. And then that's the same thing when it comes to relationships. So in a relationship, and at work, in any kind of relationship, I mean, there's certain things, let's talk about professional. So when you're at work, you probably have a manager that's kind of talking to you some certain way, or they're kind of, going up on you and saying certain things. And it's like, dude, like, maybe a real conversation needs to happen there. So when it comes to setting boundaries, especially in relationships, you want to just make sure that everyone it's fair on both parties. I don't want to cross the line for things that you're not going to like, and vice versa. And I encourage, just like you said, everyone, especially when you're starting a relationship, do it as soon as possible. It's never too late, because sometimes it's like, well, we've been dating for 2 years already, and it's like, whatever. It doesn't matter. Maybe do like a check-in. Literally, the last one is check in regularly to stay in sync. Because maybe you haven't talked about it. So you've been with your girl for like 3 years, and maybe you think, well, no, now it's too late. Like, I'm setting boundaries. We've never done it. It's never too late. Because if you want to continue with a healthy relationship, I mean, 3 years have happened, you've never done it, but what's to say that the fourth year, maybe someone crosses the line because nothing was ever discussed, right? So you may know your partner as much as possible, but there could be a lot of things that as you continue to grow and develop and change over time, which is what's going to happen. You guys want to make sure that you guys are changing and understanding each other. So when you're able to kind of check in regularly, you're able to have the constant communication to make sure you guys are both understanding of what's going on, what's the future, how are we going to tackle this together. And I feel like that's how we can avoid misinterpretation, because at least we're allowed to stay on the same page as we continue growing together.
Especially for some of those really big moments, like if you want to save for a house or have children, build a family. These are very big moments, but they take a lot of planning. And that planning doesn't happen in one instance. It's months and months where you're like, hey, let's sit down, let's look at our finances, let's look at our goals, let's look at our careers, let's look at our aspirations, and maybe do a list, do a checklist, write things down, communicate, hey, this is where we are, this is where we need to be in order to achieve these type of goals. And if that's what we have, then that's what we have to do.
Yes, and I want to piggyback off that, because your goals may change.
Absolutely.
And if you don't tell your partner may be going towards the same goal, but if you don't communicate that regularly, how are they going to know that we're still working towards the same goal? Because everything can happen. Imagine if in a year from now you say, well, you know what, we want to purchase a home within a year. And then, your partner has an idea, a year is gone by, and it's like, hey, we're ready to buy. And it's like, but we still can't, things change. So then now everything else gets delayed on this plan that you thought was going to be working out, but now it's too late to kind of fix. So what do you do now? So that's why if you were able to check in regularly, you're able to always stay in sync and make sure that you guys are on the same page, because maybe you have the 1 year plan, and then 6 months in, something devastating happens. You're like, okay, wait, we have to restructure this. Let's try to still stay on track, but how can we redirect the current situation to make sure that we're on track? So you don't do that if you're not checking in regularly, because when the year comes, you're like, well, remember 6 months ago when this happened? It's like, well, how was I supposed to know that we were going to change anything? And that's why you have to make sure that you're always checking in, because that way we don't misinterpret when we're trying to communicate.
For sure. Beautiful. This is such an important chapter, that either if you start out dating, or if it's a friendship, it's a family, or if you've been in a relationship for 3 years, like those are such important topics that you need to discuss with your partner.
No, and it's true, because if you really think about it, because everyone thinks a relationship should just work, that it's not going to have any issues, no problems. And when you encounter a problem, what do you do then? Does that mean you end the relationship? No, this is why you have these check-ins, so you're able to always be on the same page, communicating, making sure that the boundaries are set, so you know how far you can talk about things, or how far you can go when it comes to certain things. And of course, being able to always express yourself and trying to be as comfortable as you can with your partner, because this all starts from the beginning of the chapters that we wrote. Because if you're able to be your true self, now you're not trying to be somebody else in the relationship, because your partner now knows who your true character is. And that way, when you're able to effectively communicate and express yourself of how you feel, now your partner is more understanding, because they know to the core of who you are.
Absolutely, Chris. I love the talking points. But yeah, again, communication versus interpretation. I feel like a lot of people get that mixed up, or they do one and don't know the other one. They communicate, but the other partner might not necessarily understand what they're saying. So it's important to apply these key points that we just talked about, put them in action, and sit down with your partner, sit down with your friend, sit down with your family member, and have check-ins, communicate, be vulnerable, be honest, and be open enough to see their perspective as well. You know?
Absolutely.
So important.
Love it. I love it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, so again, we created the keys in order for it to be maybe a Kickstarter into trying to just redefine yourself, really, like find your true purpose and find, just be happy with who you are, building security, and then ultimately to create an environment for people the people that are meant to be around you, and then to ultimately find that one person. So as we get through the rest of the keys and we talk about, the book and the course, you're going to find more of how these continue to build together in order to kind of create the full picture for you.
Absolutely. So if you go and head to the website, thecoffeebreakup.com, you find everything. We have a course, a book, the keys, a card game that we're coming out with. And I feel like it's almost like a puzzle. It all kind of falls into each other. And once that happens, you kind of take a step back and you look at the big picture and you're like, man, this all made sense. And so, we hope this kind of helps. We kind of hope this sparks a conversation, maybe tonight at the dinner table or when you have lunch with your coworkers. Have these type of dialogues. It's so important.
Yeah, and you know what? Like always, like use us as a point of reference. So whenever you're maybe with your partner, you say, you know what I saw on social media the other day? You know what popped up? They were talking about this, and this, and we've never done that. What do you think about this? Why don't we just try it?
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on. Oh, because they can always say, why? What are you trying to say? You're not happy with this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, no, but I don't. This never even came up. We've just kind of been happy together, but what if we can be happier? It's not about that there's an issue that we need to solve the problem. Maybe it's just like how maybe we can progress and grow with this relationship, so to really understand how we can build on this. And that's kind of the point of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Or prevent an issue that might happen in the future, or maybe help out a family member, or maybe this doesn't apply to you, but you know that it does apply to somebody in your life. So share it with somebody.
I say give it a try. Be open-minded. You never know what you can uncover with the keys.
For sure. That being said, guys, thank you so much. Love you guys.
See you later.
Bye.